You know, it's a tragedy how many people won't watch a single movie that's older than them, especially considering most movies released nowadays are trash. But that's why I'm here, so let's rectify this crime against God and good taste, because today the Movie Howze is here to retro-recommend it.
This year marks two important anniversaries for Batman. 85 years since the character's debut, and just as importantly, if not more so in my opinion, the 35th anniversary of the original 1989 movie directed by Tim Burton, starring Jack Nicholson and Michael Keaton. While there's arguably been better Bat flicks since then, some incredible animated shows, video games, etc., I don't think there will ever be a singular project as important as that original movie. If you've grown up on newer takes of The Dark Knight, you might be asking yourself, what's the big deal? So to better explain my rationale, let's wind the clocks back to a time when superhero movies were practically non-existent. Batman as a property had been both blessed and cursed by the success of the 1960s Bill Dozier TV show starring Adam West. Yes, it brought Batman out of the comics and into your living room, and made millions of fans in the process. And it was, and still is, a fun show, but unfortunately it created a false image of what the character was supposed to be. When normies thought of Batman, it was neon bright onomatopoeias, poorly fitting costumes, and exploding sharks. So that's why in 1979, Michael Uslan, lawyer and former university professor famous for teaching the first accredited college course on comic books as modern mythology, acquired the movie rights to the Batman alongside his producing partner Ben Melniker. Uslan's goal was to create the definitive, serious film adaptation of the comic book hero, one that would wash away the cultural stigma from the 60s show and reestablish the character as a dark, brooding vigilante. Helping him achieve that goal would be Peter Guber and the eccentric John Peters, two hotshot Hollywood producers that saw the potential to replicate the then recent success of the first Superman with his DC Comics peer. This would ultimately be a decade-long journey to see the film become a reality. Releasing in the summer of '89, inspired by dark deconstructive comics like The Dark Knight Returns and The Killing Joke, and accompanied by one of the greatest marketing campaigns in the history of film, resulted in a multimedia juggernaut that few films have been able to replicate since. The movie covers the early days of the Cape Crusaders' war on Gotham City's criminal underbelly, when the police and public still refer to him as some sort of gangland boogeyman. After a fated encounter with mobster Jack Napier ends with the goon taking an acid bath, and re-emerging as the warped psychotic Joker bent on poisoning Gotham's populace with nerve gas-laced products that leaves its victims dead with a horrible rictus grin, it's up to Batman to save Gotham from the clown prince of crime's reign of terror. Now this might sound pretty bog standard for a cape shit movie, because in many ways it is, but this is one of those times where the sum is greater than the individual parts. A lot of disparate elements, a lot of talent came together to make a great movie, despite itself. Firstly, on the visual front is Tim Burton's direction on what was only his third feature-length movie. At the time, he was new talent at Warner Brothers, having delivered the back-to-back surprise successes of Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Beetlejuice, while Burton became a big name who's since become a hot topic parody of his former glory. Back in '89, it was a risk handing such a gargantuan project to a moody, weirdo ex-Disney animator. At the same time, though, you can see the rationale, because he delivers a Batman movie that visually stands worlds apart from not only the TV show, but pretty much every other big-budget movie that came out around it, aided by the incredible production design by Anton Furst and cinematography by D.P. Roger Pratt. This movie's Gotham City and its phantasmagorical denizens are the best they've ever looked on film. Like, there's never been a cooler Batmobile. The Batsuit, gadgets like the grapnel gun, which made its debut here, and the Joker's makeup are wonderful realizations of the comics, given just enough realism to make its absurd world believable. Because despite how critically acclaimed the Dark Knight trilogy is, in its drive to be grounded following the stellar Batman Begins' Blade Runner-inspired take on Gotham, it lost all comic booky identity and simply became Chicago in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. Burton's take is not interested in being realistic. It's concerned with what Richard Donner called verisimilitude when he was directing the first Superman movie. No city has zoning this bad, or a cathedral as tall as the Empire State Building, but man, does it scream Gotham. The only thing visually I can criticize about the movie is that you could come up with a very poorly thought out drinking game, or how many times you see the Monarch Theater in the background throughout the movie betraying how small the Gotham set actually was. The second thing that made this movie work so well is the cast. It's the main reason this got the attention of people who had never cracked open a comic book in their lives. Rather than picking a traditional leading man for the titular hero, Burton felt that it would take a comedic actor to sell someone as driven or crazy enough to put on such an extreme persona. So when he cast his former Beetlejuice star Michael Keaton, that raised some eyebrows, to put it mildly. The internet didn't even exist yet, and the internet was still pissed off about this casting. I think Kevin Smith said that, but either way, it perfectly illustrates the sentiment at the time. People feared that Keaton being Bats meant that the film was going to be a parody. Mr. Mom is Batman, get real. But here's the thing, you know what happened when comic fans actually saw Keaton as Batman? They loved and accepted him. Because unlike all the modern day examples of fans rejecting the latest crap from hacktivist writers playing pop culture tourist, this was actually good. It respected the character and his lore while adapting it to work on film. Burton was spot on with his instincts. Keaton is brilliant here. He has this really intense, crazed look in his eyes, important considering he's wearing a mask for much of the screen time. They telegraph that, yeah, he likes to spend his nights punching dirtbags in the throat and causing more concussions per capita than the entire NFL. I also love that his Batman just doesn't talk much. He doesn't have these big speeches. He doesn't unintelligently bark at criminals. He'll just beat your ass, hold you over to the side of a building, and threaten you with a gruff whisper. Yes, in comparison to later Batman, his fight scenes are more clunky. Seeing his Batman going full Arkham City in last year's The Flash puts that in stark contrast. But what's done here still works for me. And I'll take less showy fight scenes if that means I get a Batman who actually does some detective work like he does here, cracking the Joker's toxic mixtures of Smilix-tainted beauty products. Equally, his version of Bruce Wayne is great too. Playing it detached and seemingly annoyed with having to keep up this facade of a wealthy socialite, the take here is that the people of Gotham know the name Wayne. They know he's old money, but he's kind of unknown to them. They don't even remember what happened to his parents, just 2 more casualties in a city drowning in crime. So he uses that anonymity to operate. It's for these multifarious reasons he's still my favorite live-action Batman. I like that he's a leaner, unassuming-looking guy and not built like a frickin' moose. He's more Vegeta than Brawly, so to speak. It makes sense that he would need to put on a cape, cowl, and body armor to create an identity of this dark creature of the night. The only failings his take suffers from is 1, the limitations of the suit prohibiting his neck movement, resulting in some unintentionally hilarious moments, and 2, elements in the script that undermine him, but I will touch on those later. Unlike Keaton, who had to earn audiences' trust playing Batman, no one doubted how good Jack Nicholson was gonna be as the Joker. He gets top billing because it was Jack Nicholson playing the Joker. There wasn't a more perfect casting choice. It's almost too perfect in how obvious it is. Not only can you tell he completely understood how to play the character, taking what he built his career off of, playing loons and cranking it up, you can also see on his shit-eating grin that he knew he was the chief selling point to get butts in seats, much in the same way that people went to go see the original Superman movie due to Marlon Brando and Gene Hackman's involvement. It brought a level of prestige and public interest seeing an Academy Award-winning actor playing a comic book character, something that nowadays is passé. For that, Nicholson walked out with probably the greatest paycheck in film history. Back then, he was commanding about $10 million per picture. He agreed to take 6 for this movie, but made an aggressive deal in the back end so that he would receive a percentage of all the total grosses and a percentage from all Joker-related merchandise sold. In the end, Jack walked away with like $90 million, and he earns that ridiculous paycheck with a fantastic performance. Sure, it's not as purely deranged as Heath Ledger's take, but that doesn't invalidate anything he does with the character. He's actually allowed to be goofy here with all the deadly joke weapons he normally implements, all while still encompassing the chaotic madness that makes the comic villain the greatest in the medium. I mean, what's more Joker than nerve-gassing a museum, defacing priceless works of art while dancing around to Prince's Party Man? The supporting cast is solid too. Classic Hammer horror icon, the late Michael Gough, is still to this day the best Alfred. That's not a slight against any of the other great actors who have played Batman's butler, but Gough is just perfect, man. Balancing the loving surrogate father with the sassy voice of reason. He's so good that even when they recast Batman in later sequels, they kept him.
Can I persuade you to take a sandwich with you, sir? I'll get drive-through.
Then there's Kim Basinger as photojournalist and eye of both hero and villain Vicky Vale. She was a literal last-minute addition after the previously cast Sean Young got hurt right before production began, forcing her to back out. And while Basinger's a good actress and obviously a looker, she doesn't have a whole lot to do in this film besides screaming while these 2 guys play tug-of-war with her, but it was the 80s, it was a different time. Rounding things out is the likes of Robert Wool as Vale's partner at the Gotham Globe, Alexander Knox, Pat Hingle as Commissioner Gordon, Tracy Walter as the Joker's loyal henchman, Bob the Goon, Jack Palance as mob boss Carl Grissom, and Billy D. Williams as a pre-Two-Face Harvey Dent, which, dude, if we only got to see that character's story progress in later films, but the road not taken. Lastly, the final element that made this film so effective was the music. Burton brought in his frequent collaborator, the ex-Oingo Boingo frontman and Jack Skellington singing voice, Danny Elfman, to compose the film score. He's made many fantastic soundtracks throughout his now storied career, but I don't think anything will top his work here. It's just so iconic. Driving, heroic, gothic, operatic, incredibly hummable. If that wasn't enough, Warner's brought in his royal badness, Prince, to provide original songs for the movie. And while none of them besides the ridiculous Bat Dance has like anything to do contextually with the movie, man, do they slap. Scandalous is one of my all-time favorite songs of Prince's. So there's a lot of things working in this film's favor. But there is a weak link holding it back from true greatness, and that is the script by Sam Hamm and Warren Scarron. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. The original script is quite solid, besides the shoehorned-in romance to better make the film a 4-quadrant movie. But as the film was being shot, there was a writer's strike, which resulted in changes that did not, let's say, have the original writer's Nintendo seal of approval. Granted, some were good calls, like removing Robin from the story altogether and changing the climax to the Gotham City Cathedral, but then there's just things like having the Joker be the killer of Batman's parents, which cheapens their dynamic. It's no longer a clash of philosophies, it's simple revenge. The let's get nuts scene is also just nonsensical cringe, kind of going nowhere and wasting like 5 minutes of valuable screen time that could have better been used elsewhere. Then there's silly dreck, like magically appearing Joker goons in places there's no logical way they could have been. But what really bothers me most is the inconsistency with Batman and his no-kill policy. First half of the movie is fine. Batman is beating baddies senseless, but nevertheless they're crawling away with a pulse. Second half of the movie, his one rule becomes more like loose guidelines. This again is a result of the rewrites. The producers wanted to pump up the action scenes in the climax, such as turning the destruction of Axis Chemicals into a showcase for the Batmobile. So now Batman blows away a factory full of people, then he ventilates Joker goons before flat out attempting to mow down the clown with the Batwing's weapons. Thankfully though, it apparently has terribly calibrated targeting systems and no armor plating at all, so that the Joker doesn't get hit once and a multi-million-dollar high-tech bat-shaped fighter jet gets taken down with a single shot of the Joker's silly-ass gun. I get that it's supposed to be some sort of high-X round, but this scene made way more sense than the original script when it was the Joker taking down the Batwing with a tank. Though I do have to admit something. I'm not adverse to Batman killing, it just needs to be implemented in a less wishy-washy way. You can't have Batman sparing goons one moment, then 86 of them elsewhere, then trying to capture the Joker because he needs to be brought to justice so we can have sequels. Joker dying here is fine because it's his own damn fault. Batman was just trying to stop him. Him not killing low-level thugs makes sense, but when you're dealing with the Joker and you don't play the character as equal parts killer and clown, and instead just make him the most deranged maniac possible, who brutally kills the second Robin, cripples Batgirl, forces her father to look at photos of her naked and bleeding out, tricks Superman into brutally beating a pregnant Lois Lane to death, atom bombs Metropolis, cuts off his own face, then crudely staples it back on. Yeah, it just makes Batman look like a pathetic, irresponsible father not willing to do what's necessary to protect his children, let alone the people of the world. I'm not saying he needs to be the Punisher, but like maybe just a little bit more like the character Bill Finger with Bob Kane ripped off and copied in those early years for the character to even exist. But even with those obvious flaws, they did not stop the Batman hype train from completely overtaking all of pop culture that summer. The movie was a full-blown phenomenon. Not only did it rule the box office as the highest grossing movie domestically of 1989, it made metric tons more moolah thanks to all the tie-in merchandise, hats, shirts, toys, video games, albums, second albums. The marketing campaign was so expansive and bold that its poster didn't even have the title on it. Everyone knew it was the summer of Batman, and it achieved its ultimate goal of recontextualizing The Dark Knight for the masses with a legacy still going strong today. Which, hey, might as well use this time right now to give you my Cliff Notes thoughts on each installment of the original Batman cycle, because I'm not sure if I'll ever get around to actually reviewing them. Batman Returns is arguably even better than this one, featuring great if twisted turns by Danny DeVito and Michelle Pfeiffer as the Penguin and Catwoman. But Warner's giving Burton creative carte blanche resulted in a truly bizarre, wildly inappropriate movie that they still attempted to sell Happy Meal toys to, which I of course still own to this day. After Burton and Keaton effed off due to the lukewarm reception from Returns came Joel Schumacher's unfairly derided Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. Two movies I'd like to describe as bad ideas executed with joyous enthusiasm. Sure, they undid much of what Burton's films did to reestablish Batman as a serious character, but at least they're fun movies, they're never boring, and I can actually let my children watch them, you know, the original audience for comic books. And besides, if they weren't rejected as much as they were, we probably wouldn't have gotten the Chris Nolan trilogy, given the franchise a new lease on life, and everything that's followed since, for better or worse. But outside of the silver screen, the single greatest result of that original movie's success was Batman the Animated Series being greenlit to ride off its hype. The best piece of Batman-related media, now and probably forever. I think it's safe to say that general audiences have lost interest in superhero movies these last few years. We're also burned out that next to no one watched X-Men 97 earlier this year, which is unfortunate as all hell because it's like the best thing Disney Marvel's done since Infinity War. We're at the fat Elvis phase now, folks. Having to rely on nostalgia in hopes of getting audiences' interest piqued again. Sometimes it lands, like with Spider-Man No Way Home. Other times it does not, like last year's The Flash, which had the gimmick of bringing Keaton back as the Caped Crusader, which, to be fair, he was far and away the best part of that utter mess of a movie, but again, no one was really interested and the movie bombed. It says something that the superhero flick we've been most excited for this year is an R-rated Marvel movie reliant on a cameo fest from the now defunct X-Men universe. Even though this playing on our nostalgia is a jaded attempt to rekindle enthusiasm, it does stem from a genuine feeling that we just kind of want to go back to a simpler time. The idea that despite newer superhero movies having flashier action and massive budgets, they become increasingly corporate homogenized and far more concerned with virtue signaling for that sweet, sweet BlackRock money. So I'd argue disengage from modernity and just bask in the past. Yeah, it may be rougher around the edges, but at least it was honest in its goals. It's not trying to genuflect some message, it's simply there to entertain you, to make you see why comic fans like this character, and make gobs of money while doing it. Overall, not my favorite live-action Batman movie. That still begins. And my ranking of Bat films changes dramatically if you take all the animated films into account, which would see Mask of the Phantasm and The Dark Knight Returns taking the top spots, but nevertheless, this movie still slays. Because in the end, Batman is still some damn solid celluloid. But that's enough for me. I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts. Comment, like, subscribe if you want. It'll help me out. But more importantly, until next time, stay safe out there.